Elena sat still in the center of the arena, her body tense but her face calm. The hot sun beat down on her, making the ground beneath her feel like it was on fire. She could feel the eyes of the crowd on her, but she didn't flinch. They were watching her, waiting for her to move, to make the first mistake. But she wouldn't. Not yet. Around her stood a circle of massive, terrifying creatures, each one more terrifying than the last. They were predators, each one a hunter in its own right. There was no doubt in her mind that they were capable of killing her with a single swipe of their claws. Their faces were twisted with hunger, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. They had been trained for this brutal spectacle of violence and death, and today their prey was Elena. The humans were weak, they had told her. She had heard it whispered by the invaders who had captured her, the ones who had torn her from her home. They called her fragile, weak, incapable of fighting back. They had never seen a human fight like this before. They had never seen her. Elena was a fighter, though, a survivor, and she had been trained her whole life for moments like this. But none of that training had prepared her for what she was facing now. These predators weren't just strong, they were otherworldly, monstrous in their sheer size and strength. There were no rules here, there were no mercy or timeouts. It was a fight to the death, and she was alone. But Elena wasn't afraid, not anymore. She had been through worse. She had been taken from her family, forced to leave everything behind, and now she was here in the heart of an alien world, surrounded by monsters. And yet she felt something stirring within her, deep inside, that told her she wasn't as weak as they thought. She wasn't as fragile as they believed. The air was thick with tension, and the crowd was roaring. Elena could hear their jeers, their shouts, their mocking laughter. They wanted to see blood, they wanted to see her fall, but Elena's heart was steady. She could hear the beat of it in her chest, strong and sure. It was louder than the noise around her, louder than the crowd's mocking chants. I will survive, she told herself. I have to. One of the predators stepped forward, its massive body casting a long shadow over her. It was a beast, its dark scales gleaming in the sunlight, its eyes like twin moons glowing with malice. It bared its teeth, sharp as knives, and hissed at her, letting out a low growl. Elena didn't flinch, she didn't blink. She simply stared back, unblinking. If it was going to kill her, then let it. But she would not make it easy. She was going to fight. Let the fight begin. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, loud and clear. The crowd cheered. The predator lunged, its claws extended, aiming for her neck. It was fast, too fast. Elena's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't move, not yet. The predator's claws were only inches from her face when Elena moved. With a speed that surprised even her, she sidestepped, her body flowing like water. The predator missed her by mere centimeters, its claws slicing through the air, narrowly avoiding her. Before it could react, Elena's fist shot out like a lightning bolt. She struck with precision, landing a powerful blow to the predator's jaw. The sound of bone cracking echoed through the arena, and the predator was sent sprawling to the ground with a loud thud. The crowd fell silent. For a moment, Elena stood still, her chest heaving as she caught her breath. She couldn't believe it. She had actually done it. She had knocked the predator down, but she couldn't afford to be distracted. There was more to come. The predator struggled to rise, shaking its head as it tried to regain its footing. It was angry now, more furious than before. It let out an animalistic roar, its mouth frothing with rage. Elena didn't back down. She knew this was just the beginning. The fight had only just started. Another predator stepped forward, its muscular body rippling with power. This one was even bigger, its arms thicker, its claws longer. It sneered at Elena, its eyes narrowed with contempt. It was going to tear her apart, she could see it in its gaze. It charged, faster than the last. Elena didn't have time to think. She ducked to the side, just in time to avoid the predator's crushing fist. She could feel the air shift as the predator's hand passed dangerously close to her face. Elena didn't hesitate. She kicked out, her leg connecting with the predator's side. The force of the kick sent it stumbling backward. She was quick, using the momentum to her advantage. Before the predator could recover, she was on top of it, landing blow after blow to its face, its chest, its limbs. The crowd gasped. No one had expected this. No one had expected a human to stand a chance against these beasts, but Elena wasn't just any human. She was a fighter, and she was going to prove it. With one final strike, Elena knocked the predator to the ground, its body crumpling beneath her. It let out a final, pained roar before falling silent. The crowd was stunned. Elena stood above the fallen predator, her chest rising and falling with the weight of her victory. Her knuckles were bloody, her body bruised, but she felt alive, like a fire had been ignited inside her. She had done it. She had survived the first wave. But she knew there was no time to celebrate. There were more to come, more predators, more dangers, more battles, and she was going to face them all. With a fierce determination in her eyes, Elena took a step back and raised her fists. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. Lena stood over the fallen predator, breathing heavily, her heart pounding in her chest. The crowd had gone eerily quiet, and for a moment it felt as though the whole world was holding its breath. The silence stretched on, broken only by the sound of the wind sweeping through the arena, the dust stirring in the air. But Elena didn't have time to savor her victory. She knew better than to think this was over. The predators were still out there, watching, waiting for their turn. The first predator she had defeated, the one with the scales that glinted like molten metal, was slowly rising to its feet. Its eyes locked with hers, full of hatred and fury. It growled low in its throat, a warning. The other predators circled her, sensing her strength, but also her vulnerability. She could feel their eyes on her, studying her every move. And then the next challenger stepped forward. It was bigger, much bigger, a towering creature with thick, muscular limbs and skin that looked like armor. Its long, jagged claws clicked against the stone floor as it moved toward her. The crowd roared in excitement, knowing this was the moment they had been waiting for. Elena's mind raced. Stay calm, she told herself, don't panic. She had been in battles before, but never like this. Never against creatures that were so powerful, so ruthless, but something inside her stirred, a deep, unshakable will to survive. She wasn't going to let them break her, not now, not ever. The creature lunged, its claws slashing through the air with terrifying speed. Elena twisted to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike. The air whooshed past her, and she could feel the force of the attack in the pit of her stomach. She was fast, but was she fast enough? The predator didn't wait for her to recover. It charged again, this time swinging both of its claws in a wide arc, aiming for her head. Elena ducked low, her body responding instinctively. She rolled to the side and came up on her feet, her body moving like a dancer, fluid and controlled. The predator howled in frustration. It wasn't used to being outmaneuvered. It wasn't used to being beaten. Elena didn't give it time to think. She saw an opening, its left side, where the armor was weakest. She sprinted forward, her legs pumping as fast as they could go. With a sharp grunt, she drove her elbow into the creature's side, right where the armor didn't cover. The predator stumbled, its breath hitching in pain. For a split second, Elena felt a flicker of triumph. She had struck the beast. But before she could react, the creature's claws shot out like lightning, catching her off guard. One of the claws raked across her shoulder, a deep gash opening up across her skin. Elena gasped, pain searing through her body. Blood dripped from the wound, but she didn't slow down. She couldn't. She spun around, delivering a roundhouse kick to the predator's chest. The force of the blow sent it staggering backward. Elena's heart raced as she watched the creature's eyes narrow in fury. It wasn't going to give up, and neither was she. The predator recovered quickly, its claws once again raised for the kill. But Elena was faster. She moved in a blur, striking first. She slammed her fist into the creature's face, hitting it with everything she had. The predator's head snapped back, and for a moment it seemed dazed. But before Elena could land another blow, the creature swiped at her, catching her side with its claws. The pain was sharp, but Elena gritted her teeth. I won't stop, I can't stop. With a surge of adrenaline, she pushed forward. She grabbed the predator's arm and twisted it, using its own weight against it. The creature let out a strangled roar as it fell to the ground. Elena pounced, landing on top of it with a snarl. She punched again and again, her fists connecting with its face. She could feel the blood on her hands, but she didn't care. She didn't care about the pain. She didn't care about the cuts and bruises. All that mattered was surviving. The creature let out one final, desperate howl before it collapsed under her, lifeless. For a moment there was nothing but silence. The crowd was stunned into stillness, their mouths hanging open in disbelief. Elena stood over the fallen predator, breathing heavily. She could feel the pain in her body, the deep, aching soreness of her muscles, the sting of the wounds, but none of that mattered. She had won. Again. But the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next predator emerged from the shadows, its massive form casting a long, dark shadow over Elena. This one was different. It was sleek, its body built for speed, its eyes gleaming with intelligence. It didn't charge like the others. No, this one was calculating. It was studying her, waiting for the right moment to strike. Elena's chest tightened. She knew this wasn't going to be easy. She was tired. Her muscles screamed in protest with every move, and the pain from her wounds was beginning to weigh her down. But she couldn't stop. She wouldn't. The predator circled her, its claws scraping the ground with a harsh sound. Elena's eyes darted around, searching for an opening. She knew she had to be careful. This one wasn't like the others. It was smarter, faster, more dangerous. It lunged. Elena didn't hesitate. She sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the creature's claws as they sliced through the air. She tried to strike, but the predator was too quick, dodging her blow and landing a sharp kick to her side. Elena gasped, the force of the hit knocking the wind out of her. She stumbled, her body faltering for a split second. That was all the predator needed. It attacked again, its claws aimed for her throat. Elena didn't have time to think. She reacted on instinct, grabbing the creature's arm and twisting it to the side. She heard the sickening sound of bones snapping, and the predator let out a shrill cry of pain. But it wasn't enough. The predator wasn't finished yet. It lunged again, this time aiming for her face. With a desperate move, Elena dropped to the ground, sweeping her leg out and tripping the predator. It crashed to the ground with a loud thud. Elena wasted no time. She pounced, pinning it beneath her and driving her fist into its skull. The predator didn't move again. Elena rose to her feet, her body shaking with exhaustion, her bloodied hands raised in victory. She had done it. She had survived. Again. But as she looked around, she knew this wasn't over. The final predator was still out there, waiting for its chance. And Elena wasn't going to stop. Not now, not ever. Elena stood in the center of the arena, her chest rising and falling with every labored breath. Her body was covered in bruises, her clothes torn and stained with blood. The pain in her side was sharp, but it only fueled her determination. Her hands trembled slightly, but she clenched them into fists. She wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. The crowd was silent. The once deafening roars had turned to murmurs, uncertain whispers of disbelief. They had watched her defeat three of the fiercest predators they had ever seen. But now the arena felt still, almost too still. She could feel the weight of their gazes on her, the predators circling her like vultures waiting for the final moment. They had underestimated her. Now they were learning the hard way. And then the last one stepped forward. It was unlike any of the others. Its body was sleek and streamlined, built for speed, but there was a cold, calculating intelligence in its eyes. Its skin shimmered with a reflective metallic sheen, and its long limbs moved with the grace of a predator who had hunted for eons. It was taller, stronger, and faster than anything Elena had faced before. This one was different. This one was the leader. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, sensing the true challenge that was about to unfold. Elena's heart pounded. She wasn't afraid, but she was tired. The adrenaline that had carried her through the first 3 battles was beginning to wear off. Her muscles ached with every move, and the blood that soaked her body felt like an anchor pulling her down. But she had come too far. She had survived too much. The leader predator's eyes locked onto hers. It tilted its head slightly, studying her with a strange, almost respectful gaze. It seemed to know that she wasn't just another human. She was something more, something dangerous. Without a word, it moved. Faster than Elena could react, the predator shot forward, its claws extended in a deadly arc. It was like a blur, moving with such speed that the air around it seemed to crackle. Elena barely had time to raise her arms to defend herself. She twisted to the side, just narrowly dodging the claws as they sliced through the air where she had been a moment before. Her body moved on instinct. She had no choice but to react, her legs carrying her as she shifted to the side, feeling the predator's sharp claws swipe past her skin just inches away. But she wasn't quick enough this time. The predator struck again, its tail whipping around with a speed she couldn't match. It caught her across the chest, sending her tumbling to the ground. Pain shot through her, and she gasped as her back hit the hard stone floor. The world spun for a moment. Elena struggled to push herself up, her breath ragged. Her body screamed in protest, but she wouldn't stop. She couldn't. The predator stood above her now, poised to strike again. It let out a low growl, savoring the moment. It knew it had her. The crowd was watching, their excitement building. They thought this was the end. But Elena's eyes never wavered. She wasn't done yet. With a grunt, she pushed herself up. Her vision blurred for a moment, but her focus remained sharp. She had to finish this. She had to prove that no predator, no matter how strong or smart, could ever break her. In one swift motion, she lunged forward, catching the predator off guard. Her fist collided with its side, striking it with all the strength she had left. The predator staggered, surprised by her sudden movement. Elena didn't stop. She pressed the attack, using her entire body to force the predator back. She landed a punch to its jaw, then kicked its legs out from under it. The predator fell to the ground with a loud thud, but it wasn't defeated. Not yet. It hissed in fury, its eyes narrowing. It was faster now, angrier. It slashed at her, its claws aiming straight for her throat. Elena ducked, barely avoiding the strike, but the predator's tail lashed out again, catching her across the legs. The pain was sharp, and she stumbled, almost losing her footing. She was getting slower. The predator could see it too. It could sense her fatigue. Elena gritted her teeth. She wouldn't let this be the end. She couldn't. With a roar of defiance, she pushed herself forward again. This time, she focused all her energy on one final attack. She had no more tricks left, no more moves, but she had something the predator didn't, heart. She saw the opening, just a brief, fleeting moment when the predator was off balance, and with every last ounce of strength in her body, she launched herself at it. Her fist struck its chest, right in the center of its armor. For a second, there was nothing but the sound of bone cracking and the predator's sharp screech as it flew backward. Elena didn't stop. She drove her knee into its abdomen, hearing a sickening crunch as she felt its breath leave its body. The predator gasped, its claws clutching at the air, but it was too late. Elena's final blow landed with brutal force, a punch directly to its throat. The predator's eyes widened, its body jerking violently before it crumpled to the ground, motionless. The arena fell silent. Elena stood over the fallen creature, her chest heaving as she struggled to catch her breath. Her body was bruised, battered, and covered in blood, but she was standing. She had won. The crowd, which had once cheered for the predators, now stared in stunned silence. They had never seen anything like this. A human surviving not one but 4 brutal battles, and not just surviving, winning, defeating their strongest, their most fearsome leader. Elena looked around, her heart pounding in her chest. The predators were defeated, but she wasn't done yet. She had come here to prove a point, to show them that humans were not to be underestimated, that even in the face of the most overwhelming odds, they could still fight, still win. She raised her bloody hands above her head, a quiet defiance in her eyes. The crowd's silence turned to murmurs. Slowly, they began to clap, softly at first, unsure. But then the sound grew louder, the applause spreading through the arena. The predators might have lost, but Elena had won something far greater. She had proven that no matter the odds, no matter how many times she had to fall, she would always rise. She had shown them the true power of humanity, and she wasn't done yet. The arena was still, the air heavy with anticipation. Elena stood alone in the center, the remnants of the battle scattered around her. Her body trembled with exhaustion, but she didn't allow herself to fall. She couldn't. Not yet. Not after everything she had fought for. The crowd was silent, still processing the unbelievable spectacle they had just witnessed. A human, standing tall in the face of alien predators and not just surviving, thriving. She had defeated their strongest, their most feared. But what the crowd didn't know was that Elena wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting for something much deeper, something that had been buried inside her for as long as she could remember. The weight of her victory slowly began to settle over her. She had made it this far, but at what cost? Her body ached, her wounds stung with every breath, but it was the weight of the journey that hit hardest. The memories of her life before this, of her family, her home, now felt like they belonged to someone else. This arena had become her world, a place where her strength and will to survive were tested beyond measure. As the last predator lay motionless before her, a sense of emptiness swept over Elena. The roar of the crowd, once deafening, now felt distant. Her victory felt hollow, not because she didn't deserve it, but because she had to sacrifice so much to earn it. She had come to this arena a captive, a pawn in the hands of alien invaders. But now she was more than that. She was a warrior, a symbol of defiance. And yet the question lingered in her mind. What now? What was the point of all this fighting if she had lost everything she once held dear? The ground beneath her feet felt unsteady, as if the weight of the arena, of the audience, of the entire battle was pulling her down. She had fought for survival, but survival alone wasn't enough. What did victory mean if it meant being alone in a world that had forgotten who she was? Her gaze shifted to the sky, the endless stretch of stars above her. She had been taken from her world, thrust into a fight she never asked for, and yet here she was, alive. But the price had been high. Her spirit, once full of hope, now felt fractured. She had fought with everything she had, but the scars left on her heart were deeper than any wound on her body. And then, through the silence, a voice broke through the noise. It wasn't loud, but it was there, cutting through the air. "Is this your victory?" the voice echoed from above. The crowd remained silent, watching as Elena turned her gaze toward the source of the voice. A figure stood in the balcony above, their silhouette cloaked in shadow. Elena squinted, her vision blurry, but she could make out the outline of the person, tall and imposing. They had been watching the entire fight, waiting for this moment. The figure spoke again, their tone dripping with disdain. "You're nothing more than an animal in this pit, a creature bred to fight. But what does it matter? You've earned your victory, but you will never be free. You will always be trapped in this cycle, fighting for your life until your body breaks." Elena's fists clenched, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to shout back, to scream at the injustice of it all, but she held herself in check. She knew that nothing she said would change the outcome. She had no voice here, no choice. All she had was her strength. The figure continued, their words like poison. "You think you've won, but all you've done is prove that humans are weak. You're weak. You can't escape this. This is who you are now, nothing more than a weapon, a tool for our amusement." Elena felt the weight of their words, but she refused to let them break her. She had come too far to give up now. She wasn't going to let anyone tell her who she was. She was more than a fighter. She was more than their entertainment, and she would prove it. "I am not your tool," Elena's voice rang out, strong and clear. "I am not your weapon, I am a human, and I will not be broken." The figure above said nothing, but Elena could feel the shift in the air. Something had changed. The crowd, once silent, now murmured. Her words had reached them. The power of her defiance had struck a chord, even among those who had once cheered for the predators. But as Elena stood there, surrounded by the ruins of the battle, she felt a deep sense of loneliness creeping in. The victory was hers, yes, but what did it mean if there was no one left to share it with? She turned her gaze back to the fallen predator at her feet, the one she had fought so hard to defeat. She had taken down the most powerful creature she had ever faced, but at what cost? Was this the kind of victory she had dreamed of? Was this what her life had become? For a moment, Elena closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the weight of everything she had been through. The pain, the loss, the endless battles. She had fought with all her strength, but there was still something missing, something she couldn't quite grasp. And then something shifted within her, a spark of realization. She didn't need to be defined by the arena, by the fight. She didn't need to be trapped in a cycle of violence and bloodshed. She could be more than that. She could rise above it. She had already fought for her survival. Now it was time to fight for her freedom. Elena took a deep breath, steadying herself. The crowd was still watching, waiting for her next move. She could feel their eyes on her, the pressure of their expectations bearing down on her. But this time, she wasn't going to fight for their approval. She was going to fight for herself. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena again, but this time it was different. There was no mockery in the tone, no cruel excitement. It was simply a statement. "Victory belongs to the human." The crowd erupted in cheers, but Elena didn't hear them. She wasn't listening to the roar of the audience anymore. She wasn't listening to the voices that had tried to break her. She was listening to herself, to the quiet strength that had carried her this far. She had won, but this time the victory wasn't just about surviving. It was about reclaiming her own power, her own voice. Elena took one last look at the arena, the place that had become both her prison and her proving ground. And then she walked away. Lena's footsteps echoed in the silent arena as she made her way towards the exit. Her body was battered, her face bruised, but there was a fire in her heart that nothing could extinguish. The victory she had earned was not just one of physical strength, but of spirit. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt free. But she knew that freedom, true freedom, would require more than just surviving this arena. She had to escape. She had to reclaim her life. The harsh glare of the sun burned her skin as she stepped outside, the arena doors closing behind her with a heavy, final thud. For a moment she paused, taking in the sight before her. The alien landscape stretched out, vast and uninviting. The ground was cracked and barren, and the sky was a dull, sickly yellow. There was nothing here, no life, no hope, nothing but the cold emptiness of this alien world. But Elena wasn't going to let this place take her spirit. She had fought too hard, survived too much. She wasn't going to let herself be swallowed by this world. She had to find a way out, a way to go back to her own world, to her family. She had to find a way to escape the nightmare. She didn't know how long she had been trapped on this alien planet. Days, weeks. Time had no meaning in the arena. Every day had blurred together in a haze of blood, sweat, and pain. But now she could feel the tug of something stronger, a drive to get out, to go home. Her mind raced as she scanned her surroundings. She knew the aliens who had brought her here would be watching, waiting for any sign of weakness. They wouldn't let her escape without a fight. She could feel their presence, the threat of their power looming over her like a dark cloud. But Elena wasn't afraid, not anymore. She had survived the arena, faced down 4 of their most deadly predators. She had proved her strength, her resilience, and now she would prove her determination. She kept moving, her legs aching with every step, but she didn't stop. She couldn't afford to. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat urging her forward. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay here. She had to find a way off this planet, a way to break free from the chains that bound her. Her mind flashed back to the battles, to the predators she had defeated. Each one had come for her with the intent to kill, but each one had underestimated her. They hadn't counted on her will to survive, her refusal to give up. And now, as she walked through the alien wasteland, she realized that same will, that same fire inside her, was all she needed to escape. She stumbled forward, her vision blurry, her body protesting every movement. The pain in her side throbbed with each breath, but she kept pushing forward. She couldn't stop. Not now, not when she was so close. And then, as if on cue, the ground trembled beneath her feet. A low hum filled the air, a sound that grew louder and louder with every passing second. Elena froze. Her eyes darted around, searching for the source of the noise. She knew what it meant. The aliens were coming. They had found her. Panic surged through her, but she forced it down. She had to stay calm. She had to think. Her eyes scanned the horizon, looking for any sign of an escape route, any chance to hide. But there was nothing. Just the barren landscape stretching out in all directions. She turned to face the sound, her fists clenched. She wasn't going to run. She had faced monsters, aliens, and death itself. She wasn't going to let them take her now. If they wanted her, they would have to fight for it. The noise grew louder, the ground vibrating beneath her. And then from the dust and smoke ahead, a ship appeared. It was massive, a sleek, dark vessel with glowing lights that cut through the haze. The ship landed with a heavy thud, sending a shockwave through the ground. Elena's heart skipped a beat. She recognized it instantly. It was the ship that had brought her here, the ship of the invaders. The doors of the ship opened slowly, and a figure stepped out. Elena's heart sank as she recognized the tall, imposing figure. It was the leader, the one who had spoken from the balcony, the one who had taunted her during the battle. He was everything Elena hated: cold, calculating, cruel. And now he was standing in front of her, the leader of the very force that had brought her to this hellish place. "I knew you would survive," the leader said, his voice smooth, almost mocking. "You humans are resilient, but no matter how strong you are, you will never escape. You are ours." Elena's fists clenched. The fire inside her flared up once again. "I'm not yours," she said, her voice steady. "I'm not anyone's, and I'm leaving." The leader chuckled, a low, cruel sound that sent a chill down her spine. "You think you can just walk away from this, from us? You belong to us now, human. You always will." Elena's heart raced, but she didn't back down. "I belong to no one," she said firmly, "and you won't keep me here. You can try to control me, but I'll never be your slave." The leader's smile faltered for a moment, his eyes narrowing. "You're a fool," he said, his tone darkening. "You think you can escape. You think you can defeat us. You're nothing. You're just a tool." Elena took a step forward, her eyes locking with his. She had nothing left to lose. "I'm not a tool. I'm a person, and I will not be controlled." The leader's expression twisted with fury, but before he could say anything more, Elena turned and ran. Her body screamed with pain, but she pushed herself harder, running toward the ship. She couldn't afford to stop. She couldn't afford to fail. She reached the ship's entrance and dove inside, her body crashing into the control panel as she scrambled to get to her feet. The ship's interior was cold and sleek, metal walls gleaming in the dim light. Elena didn't hesitate. She found the control lever and slammed it forward. The ship roared to life, its engines humming as it lifted off the ground. Elena didn't look back. She knew the leader would be furious, but she didn't care. She had made her choice. She had chosen freedom, and nothing would stop her now. As the ship soared into the sky, leaving the alien wasteland behind, Elena finally allowed herself to breathe. She had done it. She had escaped. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a glimmer of hope. She was free, and nothing, no one could take that from her. The stars outside the ship were vast and endless, twinkling like tiny, distant fires in the dark expanse of space. Elena stared out of the window, her breath fogging up the glass as she took in the sight. For the first time in what felt like forever, she was alone, but not lonely. No, this was different. She was free. The escape from the alien world had been hard, too hard. Her body was bruised, battered, and exhausted, but she had managed to take control of the ship. The ship's systems were unfamiliar, but her instincts had guided her. She had done what she needed to do. The ship hummed steadily beneath her, a comforting sound in the otherwise quiet cabin. But as she drifted farther from the planet, farther from the arena where she had fought for her life, the weight of the journey began to settle in. Her victory had been hard-won, but now that she was away, the reality of what she had lost began to hit her. She had survived. She had proven herself. But what now? What awaited her back home? She thought of her family, her mother, her father, her friends. She had been torn away from them, and though she had fought for her freedom, there was no guarantee she would ever see them again. The thought was like a knife in her chest. How much had she changed? Could they even recognize her now? The tears that had threatened to fall before finally spilled down her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly, not wanting to show weakness. She had been strong for so long, fighting in the arena, keeping her emotions locked away. But now, in the silence of the ship, the reality of everything, the pain, the loss, the struggle, finally caught up with her. The flashing lights on the control panel broke her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the display and saw the planet she had just left receding into the distance, but ahead there was something else, a distant shape. Another ship. Her heart skipped a beat. The ship wasn't alone. It was a fleet, a small fleet, but a fleet nonetheless. The alien invaders were following her. They hadn't given up. They wouldn't. She had known this was coming, but the realization that they were so close, made the fear rise inside her chest again. Elena's hands gripped the controls, her fingers trembling. She couldn't let them catch her. She couldn't go back to that hell. The fight had been hard enough, but the thought of returning to the arena, of being trapped again, was too much to bear. She quickly scanned the control panel, looking for anything that could help her. The ship wasn't fast enough to outrun the fleet, not unless she pushed it to its limits. She swallowed hard, making her decision. There was no other choice. She slammed a button on the panel, activating the ship's thrusters to full speed. The ship lurched forward, its engines screaming in protest, but Elena ignored it. The ship shook as the acceleration pressed her into the seat. Her breath quickened, her heart racing. She had no time to waste. The fleet was closing in. Elena could feel the pressure building. She had to lose them. She had to find a way to make the ship faster. She looked down at the navigation system, her mind working frantically. The coordinates for her home planet were still in the system, but she wouldn't make it there in time if the fleet caught up with her. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Panic wouldn't help her now. She had to think. The ship was damaged. Part of it was still functional, but the rest of the systems were unstable. She had to make a dangerous decision. If she could manage to jump into a nearby asteroid field, the fleet would have trouble following her, but the risk was enormous. She could be hit by debris, or worse, the ship might not be able to handle the collision. But it was the only option. With a final glance at the fleet behind her, Elena veered the ship toward the asteroid field. She gritted her teeth, focusing entirely on the task at hand. The ship groaned as it turned sharply, its engines roaring, but it responded. She could see the field ahead, the asteroids floating in space like giant rocks scattered across the void. The fleet was gaining on her, but she didn't dare look back. Her hands were steady now, guiding the ship between the large, floating rocks, barely avoiding collisions. The sound of the ship's hull scraping against an asteroid's surface made her heart leap, but she pushed forward. There was no turning back now. The fleet followed, just as she had expected. They weren't going to let her go that easily. Elena's mind raced as she navigated the maze of asteroids. The ship was taking a beating, but she couldn't stop. The fleet was closing in, the hum of their engines vibrating in her bones. She pushed the ship faster, ignoring the warnings that flashed on the panel. She needed more time, more space. The ship jolted again, a large asteroid grazing the side. Sparks flew from the damaged controls, and for a moment the lights flickered. Elena clenched her teeth, refusing to let the fear take over. This was it. She had to make it. The fleet was right behind her now. They were too close. The leader of the aliens would be furious, but Elena couldn't let that stop her. The ship shuddered again, this time harder as another asteroid scraped its side. She looked at the navigation screen. There was a small opening ahead, a narrow gap between two massive asteroids. It was risky, but it was her only chance. Without a second thought, she aimed the ship directly at the gap. It was narrow, too narrow, but she had no choice. The ship's engines screamed as she pushed them to their limits, the space between the asteroids closing fast. Her heart pounded and she held her breath. This was it. There was no going back. The ship flew through the gap with inches to spare, scraping against the edges. But she made it. She made it through. The fleet hesitated just for a moment, giving her the opening she needed. The ship shot forward, the asteroid field growing smaller behind her. The fleet, slowed by the narrow gap, was forced to fall back, the distance between them widening with every passing second. Elena let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She wasn't safe yet, but she had bought herself some time. Time to think, time to breathe. Her body shook with exhaustion, but the adrenaline was still rushing through her veins. She had done it. She had escaped them. For the first time since she had entered the arena, since she had been taken from her world, Elena allowed herself a small, quiet smile. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for her future, for her freedom. And this time, she wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. The stars ahead of her now seemed to shine a little brighter. She wasn't finished yet, but the journey home had begun. Elena leaned back in the cockpit, her body still trembling from the strain of the escape. The silence of space surrounded her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to feel a small sense of relief. She had done it. She had escaped the alien forces that had tried to break her. The ship was now flying on its own, cutting through the vastness of space, heading toward her home planet. She was free, truly free, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. But as the initial rush of victory began to fade, Elena felt the weight of her journey settle around her. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for her future, for the family she had lost, for the life she had been ripped away from, for the world that felt so distant now. It had been so long since she had seen their faces, heard their voices. Had they even thought of her? Was she still in their hearts, or had they already moved on? Her fingers gripped the controls as she navigated the ship through the dark emptiness of space. The ship hummed steadily beneath her, a familiar sound that somehow brought her comfort. But that comfort was fleeting. The memories of the arena, of the predators, of the battles were still fresh in her mind. The faces of the creatures she had fought, the feeling of their claws scraping against her skin, it all came rushing back. She hadn't truly escaped the past. It was still there, waiting for her. Still clawing at her heart. She closed her eyes, taking a slow, deep breath. She had to keep going, no matter the cost. She had to get back home. She had to find a way to heal. The planet she had come from, the one she had left behind, was so far away. She had once taken it for granted, the sounds, the smells, the warmth of the sun on her skin. The thought of it now seemed like a distant dream. She remembered the feeling of walking through her neighborhood, hearing the laughter of children in the streets, feeling safe, loved. All of that seemed like a lifetime ago. Now all she had were memories, and those memories hurt more than anything. Elena let out a shaky breath. She couldn't afford to let herself drown in the past. If she did, she would never make it. She had to keep moving forward, had to stay focused on the present. The future was the only thing that mattered now. Her gaze shifted to the navigation screen, and her heart skipped a beat as the familiar coordinates of her home planet blinked back at her. It was still a long way off, but the fact that it was even within reach felt like a small miracle. The flight had been longer than she had expected, and there were still dangers ahead. There would always be dangers. The aliens wouldn't give up. She knew that. They would be hunting her, searching for her. And if they found her, she wasn't sure if she could survive another round of torture and captivity. But she wouldn't stop. Not now, not ever. Elena glanced out the window, the stars stretched out before her like endless jewels scattered across the black velvet sky. The vast emptiness was overwhelming at times, but she had learned to find peace in it. The journey was long, but she had no choice but to face it. She would make it home. She had to, for herself, for the ones she loved. Her mind wandered again, back to the arena. The moment she had taken control of the ship, leaving the alien planet behind, had been the first true taste of freedom she had felt in ages. But now, as the excitement of that moment faded, a new reality settled in. There was so much waiting for her. There were questions that had no answers and fears that lingered in the corners of her mind. What if she wasn't the same person she had been before all of this? What if she could never find her way back to who she was? What if the family she longed to reunite with had already given up hope? The thought gnawed at her, but she pushed it aside. She had to be strong. She had no other choice. The ship hummed, the sound soothing now, a constant reminder that she was moving forward. She was making progress. Her body ached and her mind was heavy with the weight of everything she had been through, but she knew there was no turning back. She had come too far. She had fought too hard. The stars ahead of her seemed to grow brighter as she neared her destination. The familiar feeling of home tugged at her heart, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel the smallest spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for her to rebuild, to heal, to find peace. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft ping of an alert on the control panel. Elena's heart skipped a beat as she quickly checked the display. A warning light flashed across the screen, an incoming signal. It was weak, distorted, but unmistakable. A transmission. She hesitated for a moment. Was it a trap? Had the aliens found her already? She had to be careful. They had trackers, and if they knew her location, they would never stop hunting her. But something deep inside her told her to answer it, to see if it was real, if it was a sign. With trembling fingers, Elena pressed the button to accept the transmission. A crackling noise filled the cockpit, and then the screen flickered. For a moment, all Elena could see was static, but then the image cleared. Her heart stopped. It was a familiar face, one she had thought she would never see again. Her mother. Tears filled Elena's eyes as she saw her mother's face on the screen. She looked older, more tired, but it was unmistakably her. A wave of emotion washed over Elena, so strong it nearly knocked her breath away. She had thought she would never see her family again, and yet here her mother was, reaching out to her from across the stars. Elena, her mother's voice crackled through the static. "My daughter, you're alive." Elena's heart broke as she listened to the trembling voice. She had never imagined hearing those words again. It felt like a dream, but it was real. Her mother had found her. "Mom," Elena whispered, her voice cracking. I'm coming home." The tears streamed down her face, now unstoppable. She had fought so long, so hard for this moment, and now it was finally here. Her mother's face softened. "We've been waiting for you. Don't worry, Elena, we'll be here when you arrive." The connection began to crackle again, and the image of her mother began to fade. Elena's chest tightened as she watched the screen glitch, but the last thing she heard before the signal was lost was her mother's voice, clear and full of love. "Come home, sweetheart." Elena wiped her tears, her heart soaring as the final words echoed in her ears. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace. She wasn't just running anymore. She was returning home. She looked ahead at the stars, the path now clear. No matter what lay ahead, Elena knew one thing: she was going home. And nothing, no one could take that away from her.